Afternoon, Mike. I'm good, thanks.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we've got what is it, 7 hours of time between us now?
7 hours and a lifetime in some aspects.
That's right. There you go. Well, thank you for joining us on Views from the Ramp today. It's a beautiful Thursday here in Minneapolis. I know from our discussion at the beginning, you guys have some rain there. Hopefully, it doesn't impact the webinar or our recording today.
Well, if you see it go dark, it's because the thunder and lightning is hitting, but it was about this time yesterday, but we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, to everybody that's joining us, welcome to the next edition of the NATA Safety First Views from the Ramp. My name is Mike France. I am the Managing Director of Safety and Training at NATA, and I am joined by Terry Yeomans. Terry is the Program Director. I'm sorry, Terry, that's terrible. I should know exactly what your title is.
Yeah, Program Director for the IBAC, the International Standard for Business Aircraft Handling, with IBAC, International Business Aviation Council, based out of Montreal.
All right, so our topic today is obviously going to be talking about ISBA, and we already seen the kind of the difference, ISBAH, ISBA. I'm sure there's other pronunciations of it out there in the industry, much like there is for NATA or NATA or so on. So Terry, maybe we could start off just for those people who are going, wait a minute, ISBAH, ISBA, what in the world is that? Could you start off with a quick little primer just for our attendees in case they're not sure what ISBA is?
Yeah, so IBAC, the International Business Aviation Council, we represent business aviation entities at ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. We've been going now we're coming up for our 35th year now as an organization, and we are there to help business aviation at the rulemaking stage when the rules come out of ICAO to the states. So we're there helping with the rulemaking. The standard, the ISBAH, is an international standard, was set up in conjunction with NATA in 2014, and it's there to try and address the requirements that are proposed and coming down the line for ground handling oversight and regulation, and in particular safety management systems, which is going to be the core of and the driver for any future regulation in terms of ground handling activities. So we're here as an organization that will help mitigate and reduce the risks of things coming down that are forced on you as a ground handler.
All right, and I think
make them appropriate for what we need to be doing every day.
Right. One of the things, and Terry, I know from coming to a couple of your workshops, you like to start them off by noting that the workshop will be taught in English, not in American. So actually, I'm going to start off by doing a quick little translation, because I know for me, just being a western part of Virginia redneck growing up, when you say states, that for us, you're talking countries. It's that little bit of language different right there, but ISBA, what's that?
ICAO states, not the United States.
That's right. There you go. So, ISBA, let's talk a little bit about ISBA specifically. I think most people in the industry by now have probably heard of ISBA. They're somewhat familiar with what it is. They may be less familiar with the specific requirements and so on. But maybe talk a little bit about, where did ISBA come from? What was the origin? How long has it been around? That type of thing, just so that we can kind of get some perspective.
Yeah, so within IBAC, we started talking about ISBA around about 2007, 2008 is when we first started mentioning it within our governing board and planning and operations committee workshops. And I was actually a ground handling representative on the board representing the UK. And I was actually one of the naysayers. I was one of the negative people that said it was a bad idea to try and introduce an international standard, because from my flight ops and ground handling background, I knew full well that the thing that drove people to use an FBO generally was cheap fuel. Cheap fuel was the bit that was driving everybody to pick their FBOs, including me when we were operating aircraft. Where's the
Right.
cheapest fuel? It became very, very obvious around about 2011, late in 2011, that there were rumors and whisperings about possible regulation coming down the line for ground handling, particularly here in Europe, but in other states as well, in the ICAO states. So we looked at the opportunity of whether we could do something based on IBAC's ISBAO, Business Aircraft Operators Standard, and how we could actually work with somebody like NATA to develop a set of international standards that would be acceptable and aligned with the requirements that are being proposed at both ICAO and with EASA here in Europe. And that's really where it came from. We pushed the go button on that in 2013, started negotiations with you and your team at NATA. And then, as you know, Mike, we had a very, very interesting small gathering around a dining room table one snowy day in Washington, where we were there to sit and discuss and move forward with it. And there was 5 of us around that table that actually came up with the standards as they are. So launched it in 2014, and the regulation requirements and the work towards regulation actually started at both ICAO and European level later that year. So the timing was perfect in terms of us being able to go to the regulators and say, we have something that will work for the non-scheduled airline type of operation.
Yeah, I seem to remember a very snowy trudge to lunch down the roads with walking in, ankle deep snow. So it was an ominous start for ISBA, but we overcame that very quickly, I think.
Yeah, it was certainly interesting, and having picked a hotel that was close to where we were going to hold the meeting, and then ended up being the one that had to travel the furthest by road and taxi. Yeah.
Well, that's mid-Atlantic weather in the U.S. Completely unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen, and a week later it'll be totally different. So, yeah, and you talk about the timing being just right for ISBA, and I always think, looking back, that there is something to that. NATA had just launched probably a year and a half prior the Safety First Ground Audit Standard, designed to help encourage our members to adopt safety management principles and systems. And we had garnered a good bit of participation from aircraft operators and even FBOs, and it really became the perfect time to look at standardization and say, do we want a U.S. standard and a European standard, or do we want one global standard? And I know, from the NATA and the NATA membership perspective, I think the exciting part of ISBA was that we were all going to work together to come up with a global standard. We would use pieces of other things that were out there, including the Safety First Ground Audit Standard would be rolled into the initial versions of ISBA to kind of help give it some legs to get started. So where has the standard gone since that day? Where do we find ourselves? Let's fast forward now to 2020. Tell us where we are today, Terry.
So here we are 6 years later, and we've got 230 people or 230 organizations that have stepped up to the plate and said, we want to show that we're doing things above and beyond what we need to be doing. They've really taken the lead as organizations and should be, I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, as I'm sure you do as well, Mike, and your team, from their support and willingness to take that leap of faith, really, because that's what it is. It's a leap of faith to do something that I don't have to do.
Right.
I don't have to do this. And I think people get very, very surprised when I say, say to them that this is something you don't have to do. We're not forcing anybody to do this. This is voluntary program. So, from zero to voluntary, 6 years later, 230 organizations have taken that leap of faith, gone through to stage 1. We have 112 of those now that have actually gone through to the second stage, which is not just the present and suitable elements of the SMS, but now showing that they are appropriate and effective and operating the way that they're intended to be working. And then we have a small group of 3 organizations now globally that have met stage 3, and that's in line with the planning. So it's 2 years between each stage. So we would expect to see the stage 3s started coming through last year, and we'll start to see those coming through in the next few years. The thing about the stage 3 is, again, you don't have to do it. We want everybody to move from stage 1 to stage 2, show that the system's working, and we want everybody to stay at stage 2. A few organizations will choose to go up because it's 1 extra,
Right.
but we don't have to. So we're very, very pleased with it. And on a global basis, it's about a 50-50 split between the US and the rest of the world. You know, the US, because you've got a big market out there for FBOs, have been the lead, but the rest of the world is very, very quickly catching up, and in many cases is actually taking the lead as well. So you guys need to catch up now.
All right, no problem. Love a challenge. So, you mentioned voluntary standard, and I think, it absolutely is a voluntary standard. It's amazing what the industry has done, by collaboration and working together and saying, we generally want to, all come together to say, let's, lift our standards, let's all work together to improve safety. But, one of the driving forces behind ISBA was the idea that there would be some type, or there could be some type of regulation. We're seeing a little bit of that starting to occur now in Europe, right? We even see some of that here in the US, maybe not directly on ground handlers, but the talk of, requirements for safety management systems for, on-demand charter operators, for example, would continue to put pressure down onto FBOs to then have safety management systems. So, I'll ask you the dangerous question of forward-looking, statements here. What do you see as far as the global atmosphere towards regulation of ground handling? Is that something that's coming? Is that something that, is a long way off? What do you think?
So I actually, the last 2 days, I've been on the ICAO Ground Handling Task Force meeting 11. That took part virtually, and that is the driver for the regulation, or the oversight of ground handling by states. And again, back to ICAO states, not United States and individuals. Right. So yes, it is coming. It is still some time away. The work is still ongoing. I think we and the airline industry are not necessarily wanting regulation, but the industry is being told we have to be regulated. So if we have to do something, then why not be in there at the rulemaking stage, and let's make the regulations work the way we want them to work for our sector. So there's a lot of discussions that are coming up. As you know, Mike, you've been in these meetings at ICAO as well. They are mainly airline representatives that are in there. The regulators that are in there, no airlines. They don't necessarily understand our sector. So simple little things like just not understanding that we may not need to park on an airport stand. We can park our aircraft anywhere.
Right.
We can operate from anywhere to an international airport. Things like that they don't understand that, and they've never really realized it. So we have a lot of discussions about, and I spend a lot of time, as do the rest of us at IBAC when we're talking with ICAO, is trying to explain to people that one size does not fit all. We are a different beast in our sector. And as we've done, or has happened with ICAO with Annex 6, which is the operation of aircraft, it's split into Annex 6 Part 1, which is commercial operations, Annex 6 Part 2, which is international general aviation. From a ground handling perspective, you as an FBO are not necessarily going to know whether the aircraft that's parked on your ramp is an Annex 6 Part 1 operation or an Annex 6 Part 2 operation. Right. So it doesn't really matter to you whether it's commercial or non-commercial. It's an aircraft that you need to handle.
That's right, yeah.
We have to make sure that we don't link it unnecessarily with commercial or non-commercial activities. And we make sure that the regulations are written so that you as an FBO can deal with a Gulfstream or a 767 or an A340, be it commercial or private, the way you and the operator wants that to be dealt with, not the way the airlines would expect it to be dealt with.
Right. Well, I know, and something that you said there really rings true for me. And I know we've talked to many of our NATA members and safety first participants regarding safety management systems in ISPA, and even all the way back into the safety first ground audit standard was regulation of ground handling to some extent, even if it's just indirectly, is going to continue to grow. Aircraft operators, safety management system will be coming for aircraft operators over time. And really the only choice is, do you want the, here in the US anyway, do you want the FAA coming to you saying, here is the way you're going to manage safety? Or do you want the FAA coming to you saying, hey, help us understand how you're currently doing it so that we can incorporate that into what the rules are? And that's exactly what you said. So I mentioned again safety first and NATA. So I've got to ask the question, Terry, because it's the one I think both of us have heard a bunch. So I'm an FBO, I'm a ground handler. Which is it I should be doing? Is it safety first, or is it ISBA? We've got these two programs out there, and right now some people at least are looking at them as being, well, should I be doing this or should I be doing that?
Oh, I think the simple question to that is both. That's what we would like you to be doing. But of course, the safety first training is just one element of a management system that the ISBAR is. So by doing safety first training, the PLST, that covers the training requirements that we have within the standard. So it covers that requirement. It's as simple as that. It makes it easier for you. Once you've done your training and your staff are trained, then you can move on to the rest of the system if you wish to. Again, voluntary.
Right.
But ultimately, the expectations are from every aircraft operator that when I take my aircraft to location A, B, C, D, wherever it is in the world, that those people are trained. And the PLST system, the safety first system, is the method of training that we would like to see push forward with the standard. So they're complementary. You have to have training, full stop.
Right.
You have to have training.
And I think that's the perfect message. I love.
You don't have to have the ISBAR, but
right.
The ISBAR currently is voluntary, and it is great if you can do both. That's what we would love everybody to be doing. That will leave the operators with the option of knowing that they have a choice between two locations on an airfield. They can say, we know these guys are trained well. We know these guys have a good management system in place. We know that they've been overseen by an independent third party. Our risk to our operation and damage to our aircraft is going to be less at this location than it is at that. It then becomes down to them to decide, is that worth 1 cent a gallon, 2 cents a gallon, 5 cents a gallon price break for them? Right.
Well, let's address this head on here. Are you seeing or are you hearing from ISBA participants and the hundreds of people you talk to around the industry? Are you seeing a change in aircraft operator behavior, even if it's small, right now, regarding looking at safety as a component of the decision-making process?
It very much depends on where that operation is. If the operator themselves has a good, mature SMS, then safety seems to be more of a driver. Cost is always an element,
absolutely,
no matter who they are.
Right.
But safety is being seen to be more of a driver than it was. But it is down to the SMS, safety management system, that aircraft operator is using. And unfortunately, again, from your perspective in the US, that drive to have an SMS within either the Part 91 operators is a lot less than it is in the rest of the world. So, that may be why in the US it's not driven as much, but certainly in the rest of the world, we're seeing this being seen as something that this is what we want to look for in our service provision.
Right. And I think, in the US, while the regulatory aspect may be a little different, I think one of the big drivers, because I think we are seeing the beginnings of a change from aircraft operator behavior. I'm not saying that, large scale right now, operators are saying, I'm choosing this FBO over this one because of safety. But I think they're beginning now to realize and recognize it's in their interest to actively ask about safety. Terry, I always go back to the analogy that you threw out early on in some of the workshops, talking about how many of you all went out to dinner last night, and most people in the room would raise their hands. And then you would ask, how many of you all asked about the latest food safety inspection of that restaurant before you chose to eat there? And nobody raised their hand, not because they don't care about food safety, but just because it's never been, a front of mind topic. There's an assumption of a level of safety. And I think maybe the incident rate, accident rate on ground handling across our industry globally has led operators to say, maybe we do need to pay a little bit more attention to it, especially as they begin to look inward, as you mentioned, with their own programs.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's when you see some of the bigger fleets, the managed fleets, and those sorts of organizations where they have a huge risk exposure there, that they're starting to ask the question, what are you doing about managing safety within your operation? What are you doing about SMS? Can it work with our SMS? And that's why the SMS that's in our standard is exactly the same as it's aligned with the ICAO one. So when there's changes at ICAO, we know about those in advance. So we're making those changes ahead of schedule, and we're introducing them slowly into the standard. And as they go through, they come to fruition. So there's no surprises for anybody. That's what we're trying to do.
Right. So let's, talk for a moment just about the standard itself. We've talked about safety management system as obviously an ICAO conforming safety management system requirement. What else is in the standard? Can you give us a real high level overview of what the standard looks like?
Well, we just look at every aspect of how you would manage an operation, whether it be an FBO, a maintenance facility, everything. So we have in there emergency response. We have in there occupational health and safety, training, documentation, ramp operations. That's the big one. The ramp operations, passenger and baggage handling, ground service equipment, use of ground service equipment maintenance. So it does become a full management suite in how you can more effectively run your FBO or your ground handling service provider using a suite of systems rather than just one or two documentation. So we're trying to get everybody to compile everything together, use the same format, think about things that you may not necessarily have thought about. One of those little things, and Mike, because you've been on the standards board from day one with ISBA, we've had this little, just a one paragraph called travel health issues.
Yep.
There's a facility to manage the risk of infection coming in on an inbound aircraft. And every year we get asked, why is that there? What are we doing? I'm not at risk of anything like that. And here we are, week 11 of lockdown for many of us. That's exactly why it was there. It's what are you going to do? What have you got in place to deal with the risk of something being brought into your facility on an international aircraft that can lead to where we are today currently?
Sure.
So that's been there. And when we get asked, I've been asked a lot of what are you doing about COVID? What are you doing about this process? It's like, it's always been in the standard.
That's right. Yeah, it's not something new. It's not something we have to go back and add. That's the idea of a forward-looking global standard, is to say, let's make sure we're prepared for the things that may not be an issue today. Well, let me come back to the voluntary standard idea for a minute. So, I know there was messaging when we launched ISBA of how we're going to convince folks that this is a good idea and something they should be doing. I think its success now begins to speak for itself. As you said, 200 and how many?
229, 230 today.
So 230 organizations globally, big organizations down to really, small organizations. So a wide diversity have chosen to comply or conform with this standard and go through the registration process in voluntary, not because there's a regulation requiring it. So from a benefits of ISBA standpoint, what do you hear from those that have done it, that have invested the time, the energy, the effort, the money. There's a small cost, or there is a cost to it. But what are you hearing of the benefits that they're seeing from becoming ISBA registered?
You hear a mix of things. It's all positive, and I think one of the most interesting ones that I ever got from somebody was that they were very, very open with me. They said, I came to the workshop because I was told to come. The boss told me to come. He said I was very reluctant. Didn't think this was going to work for us, and I was very, very prepared to go back and say this is going to be a waste of time. But they learned a lot. They got some very, very good information there. They thought about things or heard about things that they never really thought of before. They'd never really considered that this may be an option or a particular issue for them. Thought about it, went home, implemented it, and they said it actually transformed the way that they approach work and how they deal with the day-to-day activities. And I think that particular operator, and I've heard it from others as well, that have said this has actually been a huge benefit from us as an organization. It's made us really, really think about things. And I go back to my own sort of job history. I started working in a very, very typically British FBO strike aircraft operator facility at Luton Airport, about 30 miles north of London, one of the busiest airports in Europe for business aviation activities. Not at the moment, but it was at the time. But, when I changed from there, you get very, very insular when you're working in an FBO in one location. You look at it and you think, yeah, we've got problems, but I think I'm better than everybody else. We used to win the professional pilot FBO survey every year and sat back on your laurels and said we're doing a great job. But it's not until you get outside and see how other people do things, and you take a step back and look at how you do things from a different perspective, and you go, do you know what? We can actually pick up from this. They're being trained this way, and we're doing it this way. This might be a better way of us doing it. Let's work with that, see how it goes. And I think it by opening your eyes to a different perspective, by looking at a manual and saying, right, these are the things that I need to do to meet the standard. I'm now choosing how I meet those requirements. That's the bit. This is a performance-based standard.
There you go.
We tell you what to do, how to do your job. We tell you what you need to do to meet the standard. You show us, you show the assessor how you meet the requirements.
And I think that's a really, really important point. The difference between a prescriptive standard that says, not just here's the outcome we want, but here's how you get to that outcome. That's a prescriptive standard. A lot of regulatory approach is often prescriptive. It says, you must do this inspection so frequently. Here's how you do it. You must document it like this. You must do all that. Whereas a performance-based standard says, here's the outcome that's desired. We're going to leave the innovation and the creativity to individual organizations to come up with policies and processes and training and whatever is needed to achieve that outcome. Their role then becomes to demonstrate to the auditor, we are meeting this outcome and here's how we do it, right? Is that a fair kind of description of the way it works?
Yeah, and I think the one thing that people have said is that we've effectively been doing this. If you're an FBO that's been in business 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you know what you're doing.
Right.
What people generally forget to do is actually write that down. Write it down, document it, so that the next person that comes in can read it and say, now I understand what you expect me to do. Give them good processes, procedures, policies that you sit behind as an organization, that you agree to, demonstrate those to us as IBAC in alignment with the standard, then you can meet the requirements. And it's not difficult, it's not rocket science.
No, right. So that's something, and I look back to, the genesis of the NATA Safety First program was very similar to that idea. It was that, training and employee development was, it wasn't that it wasn't occurring before Safety First, it was that it usually was housed with somebody who'd been around for a long time and they'd done it all and they learned the lessons, and their job became to bring new people in and transfer that knowledge. And what would end up happening is that person would eventually retire or change companies, and all of a sudden the company would find itself back to square one in training and employee development. And the Safety First program provided that kind of standardized foundation of learning, and ISBA now is doing the same thing, helping companies understand that you may have processes in place of way you manage things and the way you do things, but if you don't formalize that, you always risk, at the loss of one employee, losing all of that and finding yourself back at square one. So
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry, Terry.
I was going to say that's exactly right. That's the whole thing, is document what you do, write it down so that everybody knows this is the way we expect you to do your job. We don't do that as IBAC. You do that. You define what your policies and processes and procedures are in your day-to-day operations.
Well, let's kind of end here with I'd like you to maybe walk our viewers, listeners through the general process, right? So I'm an FBO out there and I go, ISBA, this sounds like something we really need to look at or do. Can you talk to me a little bit, tell us a little bit about the process? What do we have to do? How does it work? What's going to be involved in becoming ISBA registered?
I think the easiest way to do it, and the least outlay, is come and listen, come and sit one of the workshops, come and do one of the fundamentals workshops. It's a requirement in the standard anyway. We want everybody who's going for it to attend the workshops. So it's something you're interested in, come along to a workshop. Sit and listen to me waffle on in English for what at the moment we're doing the fundamentals workshops over 2 days virtually. But generally it is a one-day session in person. But at the moment we're virtual, in this virtual world, over 2 days, 3 to 4 hours a day. Put that aside, come and listen to what we've got to say. If you like the idea of it and you think that it's going to be a challenge for you and it's something that you want to do, then buy the manual. Start looking at how you operate, look at your operations, look at the manual, see where any gaps are, fix those gaps, get your team together, start thinking about your safety risks, consider your hazards, think about where your biggest safety concerns are on the ramp. We now know that from the data that we're capturing, that majority of the incidents that we're seeing, 41% of the stuff that we're seeing is related to towing incidents. That's where aircraft are getting damaged. And I'm pretty certain that every one of you that runs an FBO or works in a handling company knows exactly that, that's where our biggest risk is.
Right.
It's an aircraft from A to B. Have I got enough people? What are my processes? What are my policies? Think about those, fix them, implement them. Then when you are ready, that's the time to call the auditor. That's when you decide that I want to be assessed to the standard. If you want to, you don't have to do it. It's a voluntary program. So if you're ready, you want to be assessed, you call an auditor. They are listed on our website. You contact them. You deal directly with them as to the program. The auditors are all trained and accredited by us as IBAC. They sit the same workshop that you do, plus another day, an auditor's workshop. You may even meet them at the workshop. You may be on the same workshop with them to get up that sort of relationship. Once you're ready, once you're satisfied, book the audit. The auditor will come, spend 1-2 days on site. They will go away, give us the report, their recommendation for the registration. We will then review it, and then we will decide whether we accept or we won't accept that recommendation from the auditor. Our whole process is to get you through this process as best we can. We will help you in any way we can to get through the process. That's the idea. We don't want to make it difficult. We don't want to make it something that people can't do. We are here to help you. It's not a regulatory audit. It's not a shut you down audit. It's an audit that you're paying for, that you have volunteered to go through to see whether you meet the standard or not. If you meet it, then you get a lovely certificate from us on a lovely little wooden frame that we'll send out from Montreal. And you can put it behind your reception desk, wherever you want to put it. avoid putting it in the toilets if you can, but wherever you want to put it, in clear sight, so that you can again show we've done something different. We've stood up and we are making a difference in safety. We're working with Safety First, we're working with NATA and industry to make everybody safer on the ramp. That's the whole.
Terry, I think that's a perfect spot to kind of start to conclude here. It's about moving the needle. It's about making a difference. It's something that I personally have been very excited and proud to be a part of. And I know the same for you, coming from, as you mentioned at the beginning, having doubts about the idea. So if somebody out there who's either watching this video or listening to the podcast says, you know, I really want to learn more, where do they go, Terry?
So IBAC.org, India Bravo Alpha Charlie Oscar Romeo Golf. That's our website. Why is bar? Look at it, read it. But what I would do is I'd encourage you is look on the list of registered operators. Contact somebody that you know on there and ask them, what's it done for you? I'm very much of a person that likes the customers to sell for us. If they found it of benefit and you value their experience and you value their comments, then that should be enough for us.
All right, and just so you know, Terry, through the magic of post-production, that website address actually appeared right below your chin while you were talking. You can't see it, but our viewers can, so they know where to go now. You can also come to our website at www.nata.aero and go to the Safety First section. We've got information on ISBA and can direct you over to the IBAC website as well. You're also free to contact us, and I'm sure, Terry, you have no problem with anyone emailing you or giving you a call and asking questions as well?
No, none whatsoever. And what I would say is that for those of you who are looking for ISBAR and Safety First registered operations, then go to NATA's website. They have a status map, global status map, which will show you which FBOs and which locations are Safety First and ISBAR or Safety First or ISBAR registered. Use that as a resource if you're a scheduler or dispatcher. Support those organizations that are supporting the safety of your operations and your aircraft on the ramp.
Outstanding. Well, Terry, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to being with us today. We've enjoyed our conversation. I've also enjoyed, you know, our years of collaboration on ISBA. And boy, sure do look forward to being able to get back out into the industry, and the next time we're able to meet up at a workshop or a conference or somewhere like that. Yeah.
Well, good luck, and let's see how we go through this next few weeks.
Absolutely. To everyone that's watching or listening today, thank you for giving us some of your time. We look forward to hearing from you. Please feel free to comment or send questions that you might have to us at NATA. And until next time, hope everyone has a fantastic day.